Calorian Republic was dying. For 3 long months, they had watched their worlds burn. The Vorth Empire swept through space like a plague, conquering everything in their path. These weren't just invaders, they were monsters who turned entire planets into slave camps and stripped them bare of resources. Chancellor Vexstar stood in the command center of their capital world, his 6 arms trembling as he watched the holographic star map. Red markers showed where the Vorth fleets were gathering, too many to count, too powerful to fight. His people were plant-eaters, philosophers, and artists. They had never needed to be warriors. Now that weakness was killing them. Sir, we have maybe 2 weeks before they reach our core worlds, Commander Felon said quietly. Her voice carried the weight of a species facing extinction. Our defense fleets can't hold them. They're too strong, too brutal. Vexstar closed his 4 eyes and felt the burden of billions of lives on his shoulders. His people had built a beautiful civilization based on peace and cooperation. They had art galleries spanning entire moons and libraries that held the wisdom of 1,000 worlds. All of it would be ash soon. We need help, he whispered. Real help. Not just our allies, they're already falling too. We need someone who understands war the way the Vorth do. Felon walked to an old communications console that hadn't been used in decades. Sir, remember the Deep Space Monitoring Project? We've been picking up radio signals from the Outer Rim for years. There's this one system, Sol. 3rd planet from their star. What about it? Vexstar asked, though he wasn't really hopeful anymore. The transmissions are ... strange. This species, they call themselves humans. They fight constantly, not just with others, but with themselves. Their own planet seems to be trying to kill them with storms and earthquakes and floods. Yet somehow, they not only survive, but grow stronger. Felon pulled up the intercepted signals on her screen. Images flashed by, humans in metal machines flying through the air, humans diving into deep oceans, humans climbing impossible mountains. But mixed in were darker things, massive explosions, armies clashing, weapons that could level cities. Look. At this, she said, pointing to one transmission. They have something they call movies, stories they tell for entertainment. Half of them are about their own species destroying itself, and the other half are about them fighting monsters from space. They seem to think both scenarios are ... fun. Vexstar stared at the images. These humans looked small and soft compared to the Vorth, but there was something in their eyes, something that made his skin crawl. They looked at danger the way his people looked at a beautiful sunset. Their planet, Felon, continued, they call it a garden world, but our sensors say it's a death trap. Gravity that would crush most species. Whether that changes without warning, predators everywhere. Most of the galaxy would consider it uninhabitable. They call it home and seem proud of it. Are they advanced enough to help us? Vexstar asked. They have nuclear weapons. Lots of them. And they've pointed them at themselves for decades without using them. They have ships that can leave their atmosphere, though nothing faster than light yet. But sir, they've never stopped fighting. Even when they're at peace, they're preparing for the next war. Vexstar made his decision. It wasn't really a choice. His people were dying, and these humans were the only option left. Send our fastest scout ship. Make contact. Ask for help. Maybe they'll send a few advisors or some mercenaries. Within hours, the sleek Calorian vessel jumped into hyperspace, carrying a simple message toward Earth. The transmission was basic. Coordinates, images of the Vorth attacks, and a desperate plea for military assistance. They hoped for maybe 100 soldiers. Perhaps a few ships if they were lucky. What they didn't know was that humans had been listening to space for decades, hoping for exactly this moment. They didn't know that every human government had secret plans for first contact. They didn't know that humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of organized violence and had been looking for someone to protect besides themselves. Most importantly, they didn't know that when humans make friends, they don't send advisors. They send everything they have, because that's what family does for family. And once you ask humans for help, you become family, whether you want to or not. The message streaked through space, toward a small blue world, where 8 billion apex predators were about to learn that they were no longer alone in the universe. The Calorians had asked for help. They were about to get much more than they bargained for. The coffee cup hit the table with a sharp clink as General Blake Harrison watched the alien message play for the third time around the Pentagon briefing room. Military leaders from 12 nations sat in stunned silence. The holographic display showed images that would have been science fiction just hours ago. Alien cities burning, strange ships raining death from above, and desperate creatures pleading for help. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said Admiral Rachel Stone, her weathered hands folded on the polished table. "We just received our first contact with alien life, and they're asking us to fight a war." Dr. Kevin Walsh, the linguist, who had spent 18 hours straight decoding the message, nodded tiredly. "That's exactly right, Admiral. The translation is clear. They call themselves the Calorian Republic, and they're facing extinction from something called the Vorth Empire. They specifically asked for protectors and seemed to think we might send a small advisory force." General Harrison leaned back in his chair and laughed, not from humor, but from the sheer absurdity of the situation. "Small advisory force? Have they met us? We don't do small anything?" The room erupted in chatter as the implications hit everyone at once. This was it. First, Contact and humanity was being invited to do what it did best: fight for the underdog. Within minutes, Harrison was on the phone with the president, and within an hour, emergency sessions were being called in capitals around the world. The response was swift and unanimous. Every major power on Earth agreed. This was humanity's moment to make a first impression, and they were going to make it count. "I want every available ship prepared for immediate deployment," Harrison announced to his staff. "This is Operation Guardian Angel. We're taking 400 vessels, including every carrier, battleship, and support craft we can spare." "Sir," his aide interrupted, "that's nearly our entire deep space fleet." "Are we sure we want to commit that much firepower to an unknown situation?" Harrison's smile was the kind that had made enemy generals surrender without firing a shot. "Son, when someone asks Americans for help, we don't send a business card. We send the cavalry. Right now, we are the cavalry." Within 72 hours, the largest military mobilization in human history was taking shape. The UES Determination, humanity's newest and most powerful dreadnought, would serve as the flagship. Admiral Stone would command the fleet personally. With 50,000 Marines and enough firepower to level entire continents. But the real shock came when the Calorian ambassador arrived aboard the flagship. The small, plant-like creature had expected to meet with a few military advisors to discuss sending maybe a dozen ships. Instead, he found himself on the bridge of a vessel that could probably destroy his homeworld by itself. "This is too much," the ambassador stammered, as Admiral Stone showed him the fleet manifest. "We asked for a few protectors, perhaps some advisors. You've brought an entire armada." Stone watched through the viewport as hundreds of ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapons that could crack moons. "Ambassador, you need to understand something about humans. We make friends. We don't hold back. You asked for help, so you're getting everything we've got." The alien's 4 eyes went wide as he processed the fleet's true size. But the logistics alone, feeding this many soldiers, maintaining this many ships, the cost must be enormous. "Don't worry about the cost," Stone replied, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had spent 30 years protecting others. "Earth has been preparing for this moment since we first looked up at the stars. We've built these ships, trained these crews, and stockpiled these supplies, hoping we'd one day find someone worth protecting. Congratulations, you just became family." The ambassador watched in growing amazement as human crew members moved with practiced efficiency. These weren't just soldiers, they were professionals who treated preparation for war like other species treated art. Their weapons were maintained with religious devotion. Their tactics were discussed with academic precision, and their equipment was built to standards that seemed almost obsessive. "Your species builds everything, as if you expect to fight the universe itself," the ambassador observed. Stone nodded. "That's because we do." Our planet spends half its time trying to kill us with storms, earthquakes, and floods. We've learned. To be ready for anything, the Vorth Empire thinks they're tough. They've never had to deal with a species that considers hurricanes a minor inconvenience. As the massive fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, the ambassador sent one last message. To his government, the humans are coming, all of them. May the stars help our enemies, because these Deathworlders certainly won't. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of angry hornets. 400 ships materializing in perfect formation at the edge of Calora Prime system. What they found made every human crew member's blood boil. 50 massive Vorth warships had surrounded the peaceful planet like vultures, their dark holes spitting fire at the cities below. Admiral Rachel Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Determination, watching the tactical display with the cold eyes of a predator. Smoke was rising from what had once been beautiful Calorian cities. Civilian evacuation ships were being hunted down and destroyed for sport. This wasn't war. This was slaughter. Communications, open a channel to the enemy fleet, Stone ordered, her voice carrying the kind of calm that made seasoned soldiers nervous. The response came quickly. A massive reptilian face filled the main screen, scarred and cruel, with eyes that had seen too many worlds burn. This was Admiral Grokatar of the Vorth Empire, and he was clearly enjoying himself. So Grokatar hissed, his forked tongue flicking. Out to taste the air, the herbivores found some friends. How amusing. Unknown species, you have 10 minutes to surrender your ships before I add them to my collection of trophies. Stone's response was delivered with the same tone she might use to order lunch. Admiral Grokatar, this is Admiral Rachel Stone of the United Earth Fleet. You will immediately cease all hostile actions and withdraw from Calorian space. This is your only warning. The Vorth commander threw back his massive head and laughed, a sound like grinding metal. You dare threaten us? We are the Vorth Empire. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We are the apex predators of this galaxy. Admiral Stone replied, and for the first time she smiled. You wanted to meet apex predators. Congratulations. You're looking at them. All ships, weapons free. Show them what happens when someone hurts our friends. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations. The human fleet didn't just attack. They performed a symphony of destruction. Fighter squadrons peeled away from the carriers like deadly birds, their pilots pulling, G-forces that should have killed them. The massive dreadnoughts opened up with weapons that turned space itself into a light show of death. Captain Troy Mitchell, leading the fighter assault, spoke into his come with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. Viper Squadron, target the ship that's been bombing the hospitals. Let's teach these lizards about human hospitality. The Vorth had expected a traditional space battle, ships trading shots at long range until one side broke. Instead, they found themselves fighting opponents who moved like they had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Human ships danced through their formations, weapons striking with surgical precision, while their own shots seemed to hit nothing but empty space. The U.S. Determination, all 2 kilometers of her, carved through the Vorth battle line like a hot knife through butter. Her main guns spoke with voices of thunder, each shot precisely calculated to disable rather than destroy. Admiral Stone had given specific orders: take prisoners when possible, save everyone they could. Ma'am, reported Lieutenant Commander. Jake Patterson from the weapon station. Enemy flagship is attempting to flee. Should we pursue? Negative, Stone replied. Target their engines only. I want Admiral Grokatar alive to answer for what he's done here. The battle lasted exactly 6 hours and 17 minutes. When the shooting stopped, 37 Vorth warships were nothing but expanding clouds of debris. The remaining 13 vessels were broadcasting surrender on all frequencies, their crews begging for mercy they had never shown others. But what shocked the watching Calorians wasn't the swift and total human victory. It was what happened next. Medical ships with red crosses painted on their hulls immediately moved toward the damaged Vorth vessels. Human rescue teams began pulling survivors from wrecked ships, treating wounded enemies with the same care they showed their own soldiers. Field hospitals were set up in space, operating on Vorth warriors who had been trying to kill them just hours before. Chancellor Vexstar watched from his command center on Kalora Prime, his voice barely a whisper. They're saving their enemies. The Kalorian ambassador aboard the human flagship stared in amazement as wounded Vorth soldiers were carried past him on stretchers, receiving medical attention from the same humans who had defeated them. "I don't understand," he said to Admiral Stone. "These creatures were destroying your friend's world. Why help them now?" Stone looked out at the rescue operations with pride in her eyes. "Ambassador, this is how humans fight wars. We win decisively and completely, but we never forget our humanity. Those Vorth soldiers were following orders, just like our people do. The war is over now. It's time to heal." General Austin Clark's voice crackled over the communication system from the planet's surface. "Admiral, we have Kalora Prime secured. Humanitarian aid distribution is beginning immediately. Enemy casualties are being treated at our field hospitals alongside Kalorian civilians." Stone nodded to the alien ambassador beside her. "Welcome to how humans do business. We fight like demons when we have to, but we save everyone we can when it's over. That's what makes us different from them." As rescue operations continued through the night, the galaxy learned its first lesson about humanity. They were the kind of species that would cross the stars to help strangers, fight like hell to protect them, and then risk their own lives to save their enemies. It was a combination that would change everything. Emperor Krexdal's claws scraped against the metal floor of his throne room as he read the battle report for the 5th time. His massive form trembled with rage that shook the very foundations of his palace. In 2 centuries of conquest, no species had ever humiliated the Vorth Empire like this. 50 ships, 50 of his finest warships destroyed by an unknown race in less than 7 hours. "Impossible," he roared, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "We are the masters of this galaxy. We have crushed civilizations that spanned hundreds of worlds." His fleet commander, Admiral Vexkoth, cowered before the Emperor's fury. "My lord, the survivors speak of ships that move like living things, of weapons that strike with impossible precision. These ... humans. They fight like nothing we have ever encountered." Krexdal's eyes burned with the fire of a dying star. "Then we will show them what real power looks like. Mobilize everything, every ship, every soldier, every weapon in our arsenal. I want 1,000 vessels ready for battle within the week. My lord, that's our entire fleet. If we commit everything to one battle, silence." The Emperor's roar could be heard 3 levels down. "These mammals think they can challenge the Vorth Empire? We will turn their homeworld into a smoking crater and use their bones to decorate our ships." But while Emperor Krexdal planned his grand revenge, the humans were already moving. General Austin Clark stood in the war room aboard the UES Determination, studying holographic displays of Vorth territory with the cold calculation of a chess master planning his next 20 moves. "Admiral Stone," he said, turning to the fleet commander, "we're not waiting for them to find Earth. We're taking this fight to their doorstep." The plan was audacious, even by human standards. The fleet would split into 7 task forces, each targeting critical Vorth strongholds simultaneously. It was the kind of multi-front assault that had won World War II, but scaled up to galactic proportions. Admiral Stone would lead the main assault on Vorth Prime, their heavily fortified capital world. General Clark personally took command of the marine assault on Gregthar Station, their primary supply depot. 5 other task forces would hit weapons factories, fuel refineries, and communication hubs across Vorth space. "Remember," Clark told his commanders, "we're not just fighting a war, we're sending a message. Make it loud, make it clear, and make it memorable." The attacks began simultaneously across 17 star systems. But these weren't just military strikes, they were psychological warfare taken to an art form. Human ships broadcast Earth's music during combat operations. The opening notes of Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries accompanied destroyer squadrons as they swept through Vorth formations. Marines stormed enemy stations while heavy metal pounded through their helmet speakers, the driving rhythms making them move like unstoppable forces of nature. Captain Drew Morrison, leading the assault on the Vorth weapons facility at Kreshter, couldn't help but grin as his Marines charged through the station corridors to the thundering beat of battle music. Nothing like a good soundtrack to keep the blood pumping. He radioed to his squad leaders, but what truly broke the Vorth's spirit wasn't the military defeats, it was the nature documentaries. During breaks in combat, human ships would broadcast casual recordings from Earth. Hurricanes that flattened entire coastlines, earthquakes that split continents in half, tornadoes that could lift buildings into the sky, volcanoes that buried cities in ashdot, and through it all, humans were shown going about their daily lives as if these apocalyptic events were minor inconveniences. Children playing in the aftermath of storms, families having picnics near active volcanoes, surfers riding waves during hurricanes because it made for better surf. The message was crystal clear. This was the world that had forged humanity, and they considered it a vacation destination. One transmission showed a human documentary crew following a pack of African lions as they hunted. The narrator's voice was cheerful and educational as he described creatures that could kill. A Vorth warrior with their bear claws. And here we see the magnificent African lion in its natural habitat, the voice said pleasantly, as if discussing the weather. Note how the pride works together to bring down prey much larger than themselves. Vorth soldiers watching these broadcasts began to understand a terrifying truth. Humans weren't just warriors. They were survivors from a world that constantly tried to kill them, and they had learned to love the challenge. Captain Ryan Foster, commanding the Marine assault on Greykthur Station, summed up the human approach in his post-battle report with, "Typical military understatement. Hostile forces neutralized with extreme efficiency. All prisoners secured and receiving full medical attention. Station secured and operational. Recommend immediate establishment of field hospital and request priority delivery of coffee and pizza for extended operations." Mighty Vorth Empire's 1,000-ship armada had been systematically dismantled. Scattered survivors broadcast surrender messages on all frequencies, their voices shaking with a fear that went beyond military defeat. They had learned that humans didn't just fight wars, they performed them like deadly theater, with soundtracks, special effects, and an unsettling tendency to enjoy the whole experience. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity had arrived, and they played by their own rules. The war that had terrorized half the galaxy ended not with the destruction of the Vorth Empire, but with something far more remarkable, its complete rebirth. Emperor Krextal, once the most feared ruler in known space, now stood in the ceremonial chamber aboard Admiral Rachel Stone's flagship, his massive frame trembling with something no Vorth had ever experienced before, genuine remorse around him. His own generals and admirals watched in stunned silence. These were the same warriors who had conquered 1,000 worlds, who had enslaved entire civilizations without a second thought. Now they faced an enemy who had defeated them so completely that resistance wasn't just futile, it was unthinkable. "Species fights like nothing we have ever encountered," Krextal admitted, his voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. Gone was the arrogant roar that had once commanded fleets. In its place was the hollow tone of someone who had seen the impossible become reality. "You move through battle as if death itself guides your weapons, yet you show mercy to those who deserve none." General Austin Clark stood across from the fallen emperor, his dress uniform pristine, and his bearing proud but not arrogant. Behind him, representatives from dozens of liberated worlds watched the historic moment unfold. "Your Majesty," Clark said with the respect due to any head of state, "regardless of past actions, war is what we do when diplomacy fails. But peace is what we actually want." The surrender ceremony was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Instead of executions and public humiliation, the humans treated their defeated enemies with dignity. Former Vorth admirals were allowed to keep their ranks and honors, provided they swore to serve the new galactic order. Soldiers who had committed atrocities were sent to rehabilitation centers rather than firing squads. But what truly amazed the watching galaxy was what happened next. Within days of the surrender, human ships began arriving at former Vorth worlds, not with weapons and occupying forces, but with construction equipment and medical supplies, Captain Troy Mitchell found, himself commanding not a destroyer, but a hospital ship heading for the devastated world of Kreshver. You know, he told his crew as they watched human engineers working alongside former Vorth soldiers to rebuild a bombed-out city. This is way harder than the fighting part, but it feels better. The transformation was staggering in its scope and speed. Human construction ships, their hulls painted with medical crosses instead of military insignia, began building hospitals and schools throughout former Vorth space. Marines who had been storming enemy stations just weeks before now worked as engineers, while helping rebuild the very infrastructure they had destroyed. Dr. Patricia Williams, leading a medical mission to establish clinics on 12 different worlds, found herself treating former enemies who couldn't understand why their conquerors were healing them. "It's simple," she explained to a confused Vorth patient. "The war is over. Now we fix what got broken, including people." The Terran Protectorate was officially established 6 months later in a ceremony that brought tears to eyes across the galaxy. 47 star systems formally joined under Earth's protective umbrella. But this wasn't conquest. It was adoption on a galactic scale. Chancellor Vexstar, now serving as the Protectorate's first civilian administrator, addressed the gathered delegates with emotion thick in his voice. "We asked for help, and we received a family. We asked for protectors, and we found guardians who will fight to the death for strangers, and then turn around and heal their enemies." Representatives from species across the galaxy had come to witness the signing. Many had traveled thousands of light years just to ask the same question. Could they join too? What the media had started calling humanity's adoption program was growing beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Admiral Stone, preparing for her first return to Earth in over 2 years, filed her final mission report with a kind of dry humor that had made her famous throughout the fleet. Mission accomplished. Galactic peace established through superior firepower and aggressive friendship protocols. Recommend immediate diplomatic outreach to establish reliable supply chains for coffee and chocolate. Cannot maintain galactic peace without proper caffeine levels. The real proof of humanity's approach came in the form of a convoy that departed Vorth space 3 days after the ceremony. The UES Determination led a fleet of medical ships carrying thousands of wounded Vorth soldiers, the same warriors who had tried to destroy Earth's new friends just months before. They were being transported to human hospitals where they would receive the finest medical care available in the galaxy. Dr. Kevin Walsh, the linguist who had first decoded the Calorian plea for help, watched the convoy depart and shook his head. In amazement, he went from first contact to galactic peacekeepers in less than a year. It's got to be some kind of record. But perhaps the most telling moment came when a young Vorth soldier, barely old enough to have served in the war, approached General Clark during the final ceremonies. "Sir," the soldier asked in halting English, "why did you save us? We tried to kill you. We destroyed worlds. Why show us mercy?" Clark looked at the young warrior with the kind of paternal warmth that had made him beloved by soldiers across the galaxy. "Son, you made a mistake. We've all made mistakes. The difference is, now you get a chance to learn from it and do better." That's what families do for each other. They help each other grow. As the human fleets began their journey home, they left behind a galaxy forever changed. The Vorth Empire was gone, replaced by the Terran Protectorate, a coalition based not on fear and conquest, but on protection and mutual aid. After all, when humanity adopts you into their family, that protection extends to everyone, even former enemies who had simply made the mistake of threatening the people humans had chosen to love.